So we've learned what demonstrative speeches are. We've identified our audience, we've narrowed the scope of our topic, and we've also picked our topic. We've also considered time requirements, space requirements, and resources. But how do we actually write the speech? How do I get from my topic's how to make a smoothie to actually teaching us how to make a smoothie, right? Well, in this lecture, we're going to talk about how to write your speech, and that includes the outline. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to decide on a couple of main points. Being that this speech is going to be 3 to 4 minutes, not long in the scope of things, and it may seem long to you all, not being experienced with speech giving, but once you write your speech, as long as you have your points thoroughly planned out, and we have all that lagniappe that we talked about, a little extra to talk about, just in case you talk too fast or your time gets away from you, right? It's not going to be as long as you actually think. So those 3 to 4 minutes are going to pass by really quickly. That's why we have a space of 1 minute for you guys to kind of have a little leeway. Mind you, if I ask you to stop on 3 minutes exactly, or even 3 minutes and 30 seconds exactly, that's a little harder to do versus being able to stop at a comfortable pace. Like I said, we don't want to give the same speech every single time. So you might give your speech in practice stopping at 3 minutes, and then you practice it again, and you're going to stop at 3 minutes 45 seconds, and you might stop at 3 minutes 15 seconds. Like I said, every time I do this lecture, it doesn't always end at an hour. That's the class time when you give it in class, and so these lectures weren't always going to be the same every single time, and that's because I'm following a guideline, which is the outline. That's going to be your bones of your speech, right? Like I told you all, we do bullet points. We don't write big paragraphs. When you try to memorize a speech, that's when you start to mess up, when you're talking and then you forget a line and you're like, where am I? And so you look down at your outline and then you begin reading from your paper, or you can't find the place because you wrote your whole speech out, so you're searching in paragraphs for the point that you're starting on your speech, right? So a good rule of thumb is to basically have 3 to 5 main points, right? Anything beyond 3 to 5 points is just kind of too much for you to remember. And then also for 3 to 4 minute, a 3 to 4 minute speech, you're just not going to have the time, right? Anything less than that as well, your time requirement, I don't think you'll be able to hit it with just 2 points, right? Especially for a demonstrative speech, just because the topics are somewhat simple most of the time. And next, we're going to try to have Next, when writing your speech, we need to know the importance of a good outline, right? We talked about the fact that our outline is going to be bullet points, and what we don't want to do with our outline is write an essay. Like I said, because when you write an essay, you get really stuck on your word for word. You remember, oh, that's not what I wrote on my paper. That's not how I said it on my paper. Oh, I skipped this line. I skipped this point. When you have a essay, or essentially you write out your speech word for word, you're not going to be able to adjust. And that's one of the most important qualities of being a speaker, to be able to be adaptive, right? So somebody walked in, you lose your place on your speech. But guess what? I look down at my outline or my note cards and I have a bunch of bullet points. Okay, I can pick up what was the next topic that I was going to talk about. Okay, we're given a topic about how to make specialty coffees. Okay, I was on variations. I was telling you how to make caramel, cinnamon, or vanilla iced coffee, right? The different types of flavors you can put in your coffee. Or, oh, I was on step number 3. So when you have those bullet points, it's easy to jump right back into your speech without really losing your place or having to read anywhere. Like I said, no matter how hard you try, when you write paragraphs on your outline or on your note cards, you begin to read from it. The easiest way to give your speech is to practice it, first of all. Know what you're going to say, but not necessarily the order or how long it should take. You want a rough estimate, of course, but not, oh, this should take 30 seconds, this should take 45 seconds, and you get really stuck on those time limits, and you don't want to write it out. What you want to do is you want to have a rough outline. Like I said, that outline is the bones of your speech. If I'm doing a topic, maybe I'm talking about Abraham Lincoln for an informative speech, right? For my outline, I might want to have 3 bullets. My 3 main points for the body of my speech may be his presidency, his childhood, and his military career, right? Or military accomplishments. And maybe even under, we could do his childhood, and then we have a sub bullet point saying his siblings or his parents, maybe even his education, right? Anyway, the purpose of a good outline is that it should be able to guide you, right? It should be able to help you when you get stuck or lose your place in your speech, but it shouldn't be able to tell you exactly what you're going to say. You want that outline, like I said, in theory, you don't need your outline, right? The outline is more so of a comfort for you. Like I said, if you lose your place, you forget where you're at, you don't know how much time you have, did you say something out of order? So that outline's supposed to be a rough draft. Like I said, I love to say the bones of the speech because you have to build the body, you know? So your speech, your speech needs to include Your speech outline needs to include, first of all, introduction, right? So within our introduction, we're going to subdivide that. We're going to have an attention getter, right? We're going to have a statement of topic, right? So statement of topic is literally saying, today I'm going to be telling you all how to keep your face moisturized. Today I'm going to be teaching you all how to make specialty coffee, you know? So that's the actual title of your speech, right? Not the title, but the subject, the topic of your speech. But then the third part of our introduction is also going to be our rationale. And so that rationale, like I talked about earlier in the demonstrative speech lecture, that rationale is going to tell us, why do we care, right? So if we're talking about, if my topic is specialty coffee, right? My rationale is going to say something like, many of you drink coffee every day, and so today I want to teach you how to spruce up your morning coffee, or spice it up, or change up your morning coffee, or maybe make a seasonal beverage, something like that. So the rationale is that most of you drink coffee every day, right? And so you might be interested in this topic because, right? Another rationale example would be if I'm teaching you how to make ripped jeans, right? If I'm teaching you how to make ripped jeans, my rationale in saying why you guys need to know how to make DIY ripped jeans for a demonstrative speech, this might be useful to some of you all because these pair of jeans, and I might show up a regular pair of jeans that I bought from the store, were $85 from American Eagle or something like that. And saying you can buy a pair of maybe thrifted jeans and repurpose them or DIY or acid wash them, rip them, whatever it may be, for a total of, let's say, 15 bucks. And so why would this be helpful or beneficial to some people? Because, I mean, everybody wears jeans, right? And so if you have a pair of ripped jeans, you can save a lot of money on them. And so that would be the rationale for the speech. That rationale is not always going to be applicable to all of your audience, right? But you try to use logic to appeal this topic to as many people in your audience as possible, right? So this right here is going to be our actual outline, right? First, I have in the right-hand corner, last name, first name, last name. So that's going to be Justice Lusk. Date of the speech is when the speech is due, right? And then after that, where it says third hour, that's not what we're going to put. We're going to put what campus you're on. And since you guys aren't on a campus, you just put outline, right? So my other students would put either the Booty or the Reserve campus, which is what the other campuses I teach on. You guys are just going to put outline right there where it says third hour, okay? And then where it says demonstrative speech, it's going to put the type of speech. And so if we were doing informative speech, you would put informative speech, and so on and so forth. And so next we have title of your speech. You don't necessarily need a title of your speech, less important, okay? So basically you can go ahead and cross that out, title of your speech. We'll cross that out. Purpose of your speech, to demonstrate, right? Specific purpose. And so what am I going to demonstrate? To demonstrate making a smoothie, right? And so for an informative speech, what would your purpose be of the speech? To inform my audience, right? And then specifically, what would it be? To inform my audience of, right? Thesis state, I'm sorry, where it says general idea of the speech. That's not actually relevant for this speech, but it will be for our persuasive speech. So the general idea would maybe be for a persuasive speech. The topic of my speech might be electric vehicles, but the central idea of the speech would be that maybe electric vehicles are not as cost efficient as gas vehicles. So that would be the central idea, but like I said, we're not going to use that for this speech, so I'm going to go ahead and cross that off as well for you. Next, we have our introduction. Like I said, we have your attention grabber right there, right? Then we have your preview or your topic sentence telling you what exactly the speech is going to be about. Next, we have our rationale, right? And it's not on here, but I said we need a rationale for our speech. So that's going to be sub-bullet, and that's going to be letter C under introduction, the introduction part of your speech. Next, in our body paragraph, we have, and then also the rationale helps you transition a little bit more smoothly into the actual speech. For the body of your speech, what are going to be some of the maybe bullets that we have in there? So first, like I said, your rationale transitions you smoothly into the body of your speech. Maybe materials, right? What are we going to need for this speech? And mind you, if we're doing something like how did dinosaurs become extinct, a process, or maybe, like I said, how an eye works, you might not actually have materials. But if you were doing a speech that needs to be physically demonstrated, you'll need to list out your materials first. Because like I said, think about a YouTube video, right? When you're filming a YouTube video and you're Googling how to skin a fish, right? How to skin fish or how to fish or whatever it may be, they're going to set everything up for you so that you can follow along at home. So if you're physically demonstrating your speech, you want to have that same idea in mind, right? That people are going to be following along with you. And so you want to give them all of the materials beforehand, right? Next, we're going to do your actual step-by-step guide, right? How do we do this? How do we crochet? How do we rip the jeans? How do we make the coffee? How do we skin the fish? How does the rain cycle work? How does the eye work? Whatever you're going to be talking about, right? What's the process of making a violin for your demonstrative speech? You're going to transition. These transitions are important because when you're transitioning for your speech, it could very easily just get into steps, right? Step 1, boom. Step 2, boom. And so it can get very monotonous, almost like a list. And that's what you don't want it to just be, listing off things, right? So those transitions, in there you add a couple explanations, right? You can add variations into there, right there in those transitions. Last but not least is going to be your conclusion. Very important. Your conclusion is just as important as your introduction. So when you're concluding for your speech, right, what we're not going to do is say, all right, that's it. All right, that's all I got. My class, my on-campus classes that I'm doing this semester, we are heading on our 3rd speech now, and I still have people telling me, all right, that's it, right? So that's not what we're looking to do. Mind you, this speech is per participation points. You complete this speech, you get an A, okay? But the next speech we do, we're not going to just get A's on those speeches, right? This is basically our practice speech. It's a little easy. Our next speech, though, I want to be able to critique y'all first for this speech, and then for your next speech, you'll know what you did wrong before you start, so you won't just maybe start off with a bad grade if you've never given a speech before, right? So like I said, conclusions, we're not just going to say, okay, that's all I got, right? We're going to go ahead and actually tell our audience, like I said, what we're not going to do is go ahead and say, that's it, that's all I got for our speech, and that will lose you significant points when it comes down to actually, grading our speeches for the next speech, when we'll actually be getting points taken off. Automatically, I believe, I don't want to be wrong, but on the rubric, it's 18 points for not having your conclusion, minus 18 points. So the conclusion total is worth 18 points. And I do have the rubric for that. So I could be wrong, but we'll look at that later when we get to the informative speech. So in order to have your bare minimum conclusion, right, we can review the steps of your speech, run through them, right, or maybe even the process as a whole, not each individual step, and then your closing statement, why you showed this to us, what we can take away with it, why does it matter to us, and then basically restate your topic. And so that is going to be a bare minimum conclusion. So the basic structure of a speech: introduction. This is where you maybe can tell a story, have a joke to introduce us to your topic, state your topic. give kind of an overview, a rationale, why does it matter to us. Then we move on to our body. This is where you go into each detail, the step, the process, whatever you're going to be talking about for your demonstrative speech, right? In the conclusion, you're going to wrap up your speech by summarizing the main points. We're going to give a rationale again, state why this mattered to us, how we can use it, and then go on to restate our topic. And you close basically with you can do a call to action, what's next, or maybe I hope I taught you how to do this at home, or I hope to see you guys trying this at home, something like a call to action. That's a basic speech outline, right? But we also have another format for a speech outline. Our second format is going to be a problem solution structure, okay? So first I'm going to describe the problem and why is it so bad. And so that can be basically, why are we teaching me how to DIY rip jeans, right? Because jeans are expensive. So that's my problem, right? Because it's hard to find jeans that fit you, or whatever it may be. And then second, we're going to describe your solution or your set of solutions. And so that's going to be your process, right? That's going to be your step-by-step. How do we solve this? And then third, you're going to summarize your solution. And so that's just another way to present your speech, presenting it to your audience as a problem that needs solving versus just stating, this is how you do this. An important thing to consider when outlining our speech and getting ready for it is that you need to write in the same tone that you speak, right? So when we're writing actual English papers or essays, something like that, a lot of times it's going to be a little bit more formal. We're going to use big words, probably to hit a word count, right? We're going to use bigger words. We're going to use words that we normally wouldn't in everyday life. We might use conjunction. I mean, when you're doing formal writing, a lot of times you want to steer clear of conjunction, so like not saying can't or aren't. You'd say like are not when writing for like an English class, right? That's going to be really different for public speaking. When you're speaking, you want it to be more conversational, very easy to understand. So the human brain can process about 150 to 200 words per minute, right? But we can only speak about 100 to 120 words per minute, right? And so I'm a fast speaker, so I'm most likely going to be on the 120 side of speaking, right? But even still, when I'm speaking 120 words per minute, you all are able to process so much more. That's a lagniappe of up to 80 words that you're not processing a minute. So that's how speeches begin to not become engaging, right? So when I'm talking and you can hear what I'm saying and you're processing it very quickly because I'm not speaking nearly as fast as you can process words, and so you get into trouble there because your audience starts to think, okay, what time does this class end? Okay, I have an English English assignment to do when I leave here. So they're thinking while they're listening to you, they're also looking at their classmate dig through their backpack, or they're also doing other things because our brains can process faster than most people can speak. And so mind you, just because our brains can process words that quickly, right? We also, what's different from reading is that we also can't go back to re-understand something, right? So even though our brain's processing and we know what's being said, for cognitively, for perception and understanding, that's differently. So when somebody says I hear you, but somebody might say are you listening though, right? So that's our brain processing the words. Yeah, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, but are you listening to me? So that's saying like, do you understand me? Do you get it? So we can hear words, but as far as processing them, it's a little easier for reading. First of all, we can do it at our own pace, right? And then we can also go back, reread a sentence. We can look up a word, different things like that in order to fully listen or comprehend, right? And so when we're publicly speaking, we basically want to dumb it down as much as possible. You want to dumb it down as much as possible because you only have one run through of this. So you want to make things really simple. We also want to restate your point many of times. You want to remind your audience what you're talking about and why multiple times throughout your speech, right? And not necessarily with this speech, but keep that in mind for our informative and our persuasive speeches. Your audience needs to be able to be reminded multiple times throughout your speech, because say you're talking about maybe stem cell research, right? This is for an informative speech. This is a very research dense topic, and it's something most people might not know about, right? And so when you're getting into those bullet points for your body paragraphs of your speech, your audience may lose track of what the goal is of the speech, right? Even for your persuasive speech, what's the goal here? I don't know what she's talking about, stem cell research. So you need to state your point plainly for your audience, multiple times. You need to make it very clear. You don't want to beat around the bush. You don't want to add extra fancy words in there. You don't want to make it hard for your audience to understand. You actually want to simplify it as much as possible. So that's using examples and stories, personal anecdotes, maybe popular movies, just anything that could help break down a topic for your audience, because they only have one time to hear it. They can't backtrack. They can't replay it, right? So some tips for that again are keeping your sentences short. First of all, it's going to help you, not only your audience. Having long-winded sentences, complex sentences, in grade school we learned about complex and simple sentences. Complex sentences have not conjunctions, but and or but, so you combine two sentences into one. You want to have simple sentences. You want to keep it short and sweet, get straight to the point. You don't want to have long-winded sentences that are also hard for you, right? To speak them. You want to be able to have breaks. So when you have to speak a long-winded sentence before you get to the pause, you don't want to have to do that, because it hurts you. But like I said, also your audience, they lose track of it, okay? You have this long sentence, what were we talking about again? That's what basically happens. Again, be confident with your contradiction. So instead of saying are not, you can say aren't when speaking, because we're speaking conversationally. When we're talking about public speaking, the goal is that our public speaking is viewed as a large conversation. I'm sorry, as an enlarged conversation. Instead of one person speaking at a lot of people, right? I want it to be a large conversation where everyone feels included. So think about a TED Talk or maybe a motivational speaker. When they're speaking, it feels like what they're saying is applicable to you, right? And so that's the goal. You want it to be able to apply to your life. Not necessarily your life, but you want your audience to feel like you're talking to them. And so that's something that comes into, speaking in person. This is an online class, but when you're speaking in person, we heavily focus on our body language. We heavily focus on scanning the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as possible, because it really personalizes the speech, right? Turning your body towards different parts of the crowd for different speeches, voice fluctuation, tone. It really personalizes the speech, and so the goal is that it's very conversational. It feels conversational because this is an enlarged conversation. When you're using big fancy words, stuff I don't understand, you didn't break it down for me, it feels like you're talking at me, not to me, right? Again, another way to break it down for your audience is giving concrete examples. So that's examples, stories, or anecdotes. That's relating to movies or songs, anything that can break down your topic further for your audience. So one of the most important parts of our speech is our opening, right? That introduction. Why? Because if you can't pull people in the first 10 seconds, when are you going to pull them in? After you start stating facts and statistics or get into a long, boring list of steps or processes? No, the time to pull in your audience is at the very beginning. And one way you don't want to start your introduction is by saying, my speech is about making coffee, or saying, today I'm going to be talking to you about how I, let's say, rip my jeans, or how I acid wash my jeans. Today I'm going to teach you how to DIY your bathroom on a budget. That's just, you're going straight into the topic sentence, right? You're missing the introduction and you're leaving out the rationale, right? All of that is important. So if we're just going to talk about the attention getter, right? That opening, this is the first thing the audience hears, and this is going to decide if they care about what you're talking about or not. Did you get their attention? But more importantly, did you pique their interest? So the goal of this attention getter is to pique your audience's interest. The first few minutes of the speech, that's when your audience are going to be most receptive to what you're going to say. That's when they're going to decide, before you even tell them anything about your actual topic, as far as like getting into it, proving your point, whatever it may be. This is when they decide if they care about what you're talking about. So you need to pique their interest. So a couple ways to do that is with humor. So a joke or a funny story. You can do it with a story, not funny, just like a personal anecdote. You can do it with a rhetorical question. You can do it with facts or statistics, or a striking statement, bold claim, or action statement. So one way, so if I was giving you a story about George Washington, right? How would I pique your interest about a story? I'm sorry, a speech about George Washington. Let's say an informative speech. How would I get you interested in a speech about George Washington? So I would probably start my George Washington speech by saying, if I'm informing you about George Washington, I would say something like, every year on President's Day, most children's elementary school have plays about George Washington or one president or another, and then I'd go on to say how George Washington's one of my favorite presidents because when I was in the 3rd grade, I played George Washington. Yeah, that's really funny because I'm a girl and I played George Washington, and so maybe a cute little funny story to pique your audience's interest. And of course, that wasn't eloquently stated because I'm not writing out the speech, right? If I was writing it out or practicing, I would have had that done a little better, right? So like I said, you want to practice like that. Next, practice your speech, right? Practice out loud and cut out unnecessary words. Like I said, we don't want these big, long-winded sentences. We don't want to confuse our audience. We want to lead them straight to water, right? And so when you have your speech, once you get your outline written, right? Like I said, we're not writing out paragraphs, we're writing bullet points, right? Because we should be familiar with our topic, so we should not have to write it out and memorize it. We should be able to talk off the top of our head, right? And so when you're practicing it out loud, how does it feel? Does it feel formal? Should you add a couple stories in there? Like I said, should you add some variety, maybe how you can vary the speech? If I wanted to say I was teaching you how to tie-dye, if I maybe teach you how to tie-dye with 3 colors instead of 2, how to tie-dye with 5 colors, how to make different designs on your tie-dye. So those are variations to add to your demonstrative speech, right? And you should practice your speech out loud for 2 main reasons, right? You want to check how long your speech is running, right? And so like I said, you don't have your speech written out, but you should have the rough bones of your speech. And so on average, how long is it taking you to get this speech out, to get your point across, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. Goal is to get your point across. And so how long is it taking you to get that out, right? And then secondly, you want it to feel natural and confident, right? And you can't do that if every time you go to speak, you're not used to hearing your voice. And so I'm in my living room by myself, right? And so if I wasn't used to hearing my voice, I'd probably keep redoing this, right? Your goal for the speech, I'm not looking for your speech to be perfect, right? I'm not looking for this to be a TED Talk, right? What I'm looking for is for you to feel confident, right? Overall, I want you to feel confident organizing your speech. I want you to effectively communicate your point. I want it to flow well, have a nice structure. That's what we're looking for in this speech, in this class in general, right? And so you need to feel confident. And so you can't feel confident if you go to give this speech for the first time and you've never heard your voice speak. You're going to want to keep doing it. So practice it, listen to yourself beforehand, get it out of the way, right? Second of all, what a lot of you guys are going to do is y'all are going to keep recording your speech over, right? So you're going to give the speech and then you're going to be like, no, I don't like how that is. You're going to redo it, or you're going to keep starting the introduction over 3, 4, 5 times. Don't do that, okay? Maybe a couple times is fine, but as you guys see, throughout these 2 lectures, I've messed up plenty of times, right? And that's okay. You keep going. And because if you try to get every word perfect, you're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to at all. And that's not the goal. Like I said, in actual speeches, people are going to say people are going to pause, people are going to find their place, and that's okay. That's completely okay. So what I do not want you guys to do is, I'm not looking for a perfect speech. I don't want you guys to have cuts in your speech. I want you to, just like we would in a regular class, in-person class, I want you guys to come. You have been practicing your speech at home, and so when it's time to turn in your speech, go through one time. You will stress yourself out. Trust me, I've done it in grad school when we went online um, for COVID. Man, when I first had to start giving presentations online, maybe if I was doing a 5-minute presentation, it would take me over an hour to film it. It should not take you over an hour to film your presentation, right? Because you're trying to get it perfect. Don't try to get it perfect. And then once you get past that first mess up, if you mess up and then you keep trying to refilm a certain part you'll mess up on, you'll just keep messing up on it, right? Because you're trying too hard to memorize something to get it perfect. Mess up and keep going, and I promise you'll loosen up throughout the speech.